Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today we are going to be revisiting a bit of a discussion that I've had on the channel and trying to really frame it the best way possible. But something definitely I think that is worth talking about, and as we have gotten new subscribers and new friends in the community, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I definitely appreciate it. I would love to bring this topic up again because I do think it's something that I am pretty adamant about or passionate about and would love to get your thoughts on. So definitely, listen to the discussion. Drop a like and comment in the comments down below, and let's see what we're thinking. So today we're going to be talking about having attackers in the jungle. Now, there's a bit more depth to it than that, and I'm going to try to make sure I cover all of it because I really want to explain my position. But essentially, the gist of it is that I don't think that attackers should be allowed to jungle at all. Now, I'm currently sitting on UnitedDB, and I want to read through a list of some of the characters in the game and really explain like my position on them in terms of jungle. So this is the current attacker list entirely: Cinderace, Cramorant, Gardevoir, Greninja, Ninetales, Pikachu, Sylveon, and Venusaur. Now, of that list, there's really three of those characters that are mainly junglers. You have Cinderace, Greninja, and Venusaur. Those are truly attackers that are jungle. And, outside of that list, like of the ones that I just listed, Gardevoir can jungle, Sylveon can jungle, yes for sure, and the other characters can jungle too, but you're really not, there's really no need to jungle them. Like Jungle Cram, Ninetales, Pikachu, those are really like your lane mages that you don't really need to put in the jungle, but you can do it technically if you want to, but not really relevant in terms of talking about like meta junglers. So Sylveon jungle, it's okay. Venusaur jungle is very good, and then Greninja and Cinderace jungle are very good. And then Gardevoir, she's good in jungle because she really has a hard time in lane, but that's a completely different thing. So today, why are we talking about the fact that I don't want them to jungle? I don't want them to be able to jungle, and what does that mean? So from my position, and I want to, like I said, I want to try to be really clear here. I think that attackers should be nearly incapable of jungling, meaning like it would be so unviable that no one would do it anymore. But why? So let's talk about a couple of things. There's basically two main parts to this, and they're kind of interconnected, but they're also kind of their own things as well. They're interconnected because it relates to jungle, but they're their own thing because they're separate issues. So the main reason I don't want attackers in jungle, and this is really like a personal thing, I just think that it would be so much more healthy for the game if attackers weren't taking up 1/5 of the team, and in terms of viable positioning, because there's 4 laning spots. That means that 4/5 of the team are laners, and there's only 1 jungle role. So that means that any Pokemon that struggles to lane, any Pokemon that was like made to jungle, is getting a viable spot taken away from them. Now, this is going to really quickly lead into that second point that I want to talk to, but we'll get there in just a second. So having attackers in the jungle really like crushes the viability and the potential to have different kinds of characters on the team, and that mostly leans into speedsters and all-rounders for me. But it also, I'm not gonna lie, it also leads into kind of cutting into the viability of running double tank comps, because while you could run 2 tanks in the lanes, you're probably not going to want to do that. And I personally feel like it would be much more healthy for the game if attackers were laners specifically, and if the jungle was opened up for more characters that would benefit a little bit more from it and not need the easy free farming. So that's kind of like my first position. I really want the meta to open up, and while I'm really never usually a fan of like hard forcing or hard locking metas or anything, I think that this would be kind of as far as I'd be willing to take it to say that attackers shouldn't be in the jungle at all, because it would actually open up more viable picks in the jungle for more characters rather than like, let's say, like 3 or 4 of the attackers. So let's talk a little bit about the second issue. Now, the second issue is I try to think of how to word this, and I'm just going to do my best. It's the curve to power for attackers. So there's like a hypothetical chart. Maybe I'll even try to draw one. Oh, I don't know. Who knows? I have no idea how to actually do this. But there's a hypothetical chart that shows how a character could power spike. And when you have let's take one character and we'll put it in lane, we'll put it in jungle, hypothetically. So let's take Cinderace. When you put Cinderace in the jungle, the curve to power is incredibly simple. It's like it's seamless. You farm up, you're level 5, nice, you're level 5 basically for free. You come to the lane, you help kill some bees. Now, next thing you know, you're level 6, and you just nice and steadily, you coast through those early levels, and you just get to your power spike, right? You just start getting up there easy. But when you put that same Cinderace in lane, well, there's less experience. You have to contest the Audino or the Corphish. If they're running a tri-lane, you maybe have to be worried about, them pushing you. It's much more contested, much more, it's a slower curve. It's a smaller curve. It doesn't spike you up to power nearly as fast. So why is that a good thing or a bad thing? In my opinion, for attackers, the attacker role is a role that is like the carries of the team, the people that are doing the damage in the team fights. And I think that is personally a really, really good thing. I think that the attackers should have a smaller or less free curve to power, and should be the teammates that you want to help in lane to get strong in order to have them strong for big moments in the mid and the late game. So for that Cinderace, whenever you put that Cinderace in jungle and you give them a bunch of free farm, I think that is a little bad for the game. I think that it speeds up how much carry potential the jungle role has, or that the character Cinderace has. I think that it gives us like an interesting perception on balance, because the reality is that if Cinderace, and this is just one example, if Cinderace couldn't jungle, like it was impossible, it wasn't allowed, or whatever the case may be, I don't think we would be feeling like Cinderace is super, super OP. Whereas right now, Cinderace feels incredibly strong, but it's because that curve to power seamlessly gets Cinderace to a place that is kind of like hard to deal with at times. But the reality is that if you did have a laning Cinderace, that Cinderace would still be incredibly strong going into lane and coming into like the mid and late game with a little bit of help. So that is kind of the secondary issue, where I think that exponentially giving like power to a character uncontested, and it's the characters that are like the carries of the game, is a little bit dangerous. They're getting the farm in a jungle, which is more experience than they can get from lane. They're getting it, mostly uncontested, and they're power spiking incredibly hard. So now this leads into a completely different issue. It's slightly related, but it's very, very different. And this is the issue of like all-rounders and speedsters a little bit, mostly all-rounders. And it's even something that I like to call the all-rounder problem, or the all-rounder issue. All-rounders outside of Lucario are incredibly bad at laning. They are just, you're not really laning because they're good, you're laning because you can make it work, right? Like, if you're taking Machamp, Charizard, Garchomp into lane, you're just doing it because you want to play the character, not because it's actually good. So, this is a two-part issue. Half of this issue is, it's unfortunate that these characters are getting jungle stolen from them, right? Because they would make great junglers. And, because of the viability and the curve of power for, say, Cinderace, Greninja, and, like, say, Venusaur, these characters don't get to jungle, right? Like, you can jungle them, but in a serious setting where someone's really trying to play to win, a competitive setting, you're not going to jungle those characters, because you would just rather have the attackers in jungle. As for the other part of the issue, which is not related to attackers in jungle, I do think that all-rounders, and maybe even some of the speedsters, need a little bit of help in the early game to be better laners. So that way, if you do want to have this free-flowing meta where attackers can be in jungle, or not even, that they can actually lane well. I do think that all-rounders should be the true class that is meant to do whatever. Like, an all-rounder, I think that, like, obviously defenders and supports could technically go jungle too, but it shouldn't be optimal to do that. But I think all-rounders should be optimal in both lane and in jungle, whereas attackers I think should be most optimal in lane, and speedsters should be most optimal in jungle. So can there be a little bit of cross-pollination and like mixing there? Yeah, absolutely. Like Zeraora, great in lane, great in jungle, right? Lucario, great in lane, great in jungle. That's perfect for all rounders. And then some attackers, great in lane, great in jungle, or some attackers, are just good in lane. Obviously any attacker can do well in jungle, but would love to see some attackers that are just great in lane. like Venusaur, for example, great jungler, but also really, really strong in lane. As for like Cinderace and Greninja, they're not so great in lane, but their power spike when they hit some of those levels is incredibly strong, and I think that it would be healthier for the game if they weren't getting that power spike so freely, while also simultaneously opening up a jungle position for, say, the all-rounders, the Speedsters, or even for the potential for new comps where you're running like double jungle or double tank, double defender teams with like a defender in the jungle. Like I've done, Slowbro jungle, like unironically done Slowbro jungle and really liked it, and different, kinds of strategies like that. So how do you accomplish this goal? I've kind of explained why I think that this should happen and how I want to, lessen the power spike and the curve, open up the viability for other classes, and also, kind of lock attackers into the lanes. But how do you actually accomplish this goal? Well, there's two ideas that I've liked the most. My first idea was to debuff damage to the early jungle mobs for attackers for the first 3 minutes. Now, this accomplishes a couple of goals. It doesn't crush their ability to kill any other wild Pokemon on the map, so Corphish, Apoms, Combees. It doesn't crush that viability in the first 3 minutes of the game at all, because it would just be a damage debuff to Lillipup, Ludicolo, and Bouffalant. But what it would do is it would make it incredibly unviable for them to go into jungle without help, which would mean that if you wanted a Cinderace, like say you really wanted a Cinderace jungle, then you would have to send somebody to help them with it because they wouldn't really be able to damage it all that well, and then you would be losing lane XP to do so. So probably wouldn't be very viable. The other, potential option is to, debuff the experience that they can get from the jungle for a little while. So maybe same thing, like Lillipup, Ludicolo, Bouffalant, for the first 3 minutes, attackers just get like 50% of the experience. And that, if you think about it, that would basically kill the viability of running attackers in jungle as well, because why would you send a Cinderace in jungle for 50% XP when you could say, send a Machamp or a Zeraora in jungle and get the full experience and really use that to your advantage. So those are kind of the ideas that I really like. And again, this is just if you agree that attackers shouldn't jungle. Again, I think that it's important to note that I'm really not a fan of like hard locking metas, but I'm also equally not a fan of giving like hard carries free farm and then stealing away like 1/5 of the map from characters that really need it. So friends, that's my thoughts on attackers in jungle, the all-rounder issue, the issue of, needing to kind of rebalance the early game for all-rounders, but also wanting to open up the potential viability for junglers and just take away that free power curve from attackers. I feel like attackers are like the role in most games, the DPS that people want to play. And in order to be, for the most popular role, most likely, attackers is most likely the most popular role in the game. I just don't feel like they should have as much viability all over the map as they have right now. You can lane them, you can jungle them, you can play 2 attackers, you can play 3 attackers on a team. It just feels a little excessive and a little too much for me personally, and I would love to see the rise of all-rounders in the meta. I would love to see much more viable speedsters being picked. Like Absol is insane, but when you have Cinderace and when you have Venusaur and Greninja, it just doesn't make sense to run those over just hard feeding an attacker in the jungle and then having them carry you throughout the whole course of the game. So friends, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, be sure to be kind to one another, tell someone that you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.